My brother-in-law invited me to dinner, but when I arrived, he handed me a contract and said, "Sign this to transfer your savings to me." I laughed until he locked the door. Then I showed him a paper that made him instantly regret everything. I never liked my brother-in-law, Mike. Something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. He was the type of guy who always had a get-rich-quick scheme, but never seemed to have an actual job. If you asked him what he did for a living, he'd say something vague like, "I'm in business," or "I have multiple investments." But somehow, he and my sister, Laura, were always struggling financially. They had a big house they couldn't afford, cars they were behind on payments for, and credit cards maxed out to their limits. I, on the other hand, had always been careful with money. I wasn't rich, but I had a solid career, a good amount of savings, and no debt. I wasn't flashy about it, but Mike knew. He was always making comments about how easy I had it, as if I had just stumbled into financial stability by accident. Then came the dinner invitation. Mike called me one afternoon and said he wanted to have me over for dinner. He made it sound casual, but there was something off about the way he asked. My sister never mentioned it, which was strange because she usually liked to plan things like this. But against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, I noticed two things right away. My sister wasn't there. Mike had a smug look on his face that made my stomach turn. The table was set, but there was no food in sight. Instead, in the middle of the table was a single sheet of paper and a pen. Mike gestured for me to sit. Then, with a wide grin, he pushed the paper toward me. "Before we eat, I just need you to sign this." I picked up the paper and started reading. My hands started shaking as I realized what it was. It was a contract stating that I was voluntarily transferring all of my savings to Mike. It was written in the worst legalese I had ever seen, probably something he found online and modified himself. But the intent was clear. Signing this would mean I was handing over every last cent I had worked for. I looked up at him, stunned. "Are you joking?" "No joke," he said, still grinning. "It's for the family, man. You don't need all that money. Laura and I do." Then, he reached behind him and locked the door. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so insanely stupid that my brain couldn't process it any other way. "You're insane," I said. "You actually think I'd sign this?" His face changed. The smugness faded. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Look," he said. "This doesn't have to be difficult. You're going to sign it. You don't really have a choice." I stared at him, realizing just how serious he was. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. That's when I pulled out my own paper and slid it across the table toward him. "Read this," I said. Mike frowned, picking it up. As his eyes scanned the page, his face drained of color. His hands started shaking. He looked back up at me, and for the first time ever, he was scared. Mike's fingers trembled as he held the paper I had just handed him. His eyes darted back and forth across the words, his breathing getting heavier by the second. I could see the exact moment he realized just how screwed he was. He started, but his voice cracked. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Where did you get this?" I leaned back in my chair, completely calm now. I wanted to enjoy this moment. "I've known for a while that you were up to something," I said. "But this? Even for you, Mike, this is desperate." So I did some digging. He looked down at the paper again, his face pale. It was a full report on him. Bank records, business filings, debts, and, most importantly, proof of fraud. You see, I had suspected for a while that Mike wasn't just bad with money. I had a feeling he was stealing. Not just from banks or credit card companies, but from real people. So I had quietly hired a private investigator. What he found was worse than I expected. Mike had taken out loans in my sister's name without her knowing. He had used fake documents to apply for credit, racked up thousands of dollars, then let the accounts go into collections. He had also pulled similar scams on his own family, taking money from his elderly parents, and even his own brother. And that wasn't even the worst part. Mike had been sued before. A former business partner took him to court after discovering he had forged signatures and embezzled money. Mike lost, but never paid up. Instead, he packed up and moved, right before he met my sister. And now? Now he was trying to con me out of my life savings. "You've been busy," I said, watching him sweat. "So here's what's going to happen." Mike slammed his fist on the table. "This is bull." "Shut up, Mike." He flinched. He wasn't used to me talking to him like that. I wasn't the guy who got into fights. I wasn't the guy who raised my voice. But tonight? Tonight was different. "I have copies of this report," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My lawyer has one. A few of my friends have one. And if anything happens to me tonight, if I walk out of here with so much as a scratch, this goes straight to the authorities." Mike clenched his jaw. "You wouldn't." I smiled. "Try me." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. He was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't. Then, something unexpected happened. Mike started laughing. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was wild, the kind of laugh a person lets out when they realize they're trapped and have no way out. He wiped his face, then leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Okay, he finally said. Okay, so, what do you want? I almost laughed myself. He really thought this was negotiable. Oh, you don't get to ask that, I said. You lost that right the second you tried to scam me. Mike exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands over his face. His confidence was gone. The arrogant, smug brother-in-law I had known for years had finally realized he wasn't the smartest guy in the room. But we weren't done. Not even close. Because what I was about to say next would change everything. Mike sat there, his face pale, his hands still gripping the paper I had given him. He knew he was in deep. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this was just the beginning. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. Controlled. You think this is bad, Mike? I asked. You have no idea. His jaw tightened, but I saw his fingers twitch. He was nervous. Good. You didn't just try to scam me tonight, I continued. You've been scamming people for years. And you've been sloppy. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. With a few taps, I opened an audio file and hit play. Mike's voice filled the room. Look, the idiot has no idea. He just lets his money sit there like an idiot. A few signatures, a little pressure, and I'll have everything before he even knows what happened. I looked up. Mike wasn't breathing. His face had gone from pale to gray. You recorded me? He whispered. Oh, not just this, I said, waving my phone. I have plenty. Because here's the thing, I knew he would pull something like this. Mike had a pattern. He'd been talking for years about how dumb people don't deserve to be rich. He'd mock my financial discipline, call me lucky, and drop hints that I should help out family. So, when he invited me to dinner, I just knew, he had something planned. That's why I showed up prepared. I had a small recording device hidden in my pocket. It picked up everything. Every smug word, every slimy little trick. And that one recording? That was just the beginning. Mike's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You were so confident, I said. So sure I'd just sign my money away like an idiot. But you didn't think things through, Mike. You never do. I saw panic in his eyes now. He licked his lips, looking around the room, probably searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, creeping, dangerous smile. You think you've got me? He said, voice low. You think you're in control? A chill ran down my spine. Then, Mike reached into his pocket. For a split second, my heart stopped. Was he armed? Was I in actual danger? He pulled out his phone. I watched as he tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. What I saw made my blood go cold. It was a video. A grainy security camera clip. Of me. More specifically, me standing outside a bank. It looked like I was withdrawing money. But the timestamp, it was from a day when I was actually out of town. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice sharp. Mike chuckled. Let's just say I've been busy too. You're not the only one who can dig up dirt. I clenched my jaw, my mind racing. Mike leaned back, his confidence returning. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to delete that little report of yours. You're going to walk out of here, and you're going to pretend this never happened. I glared at him. And if I don't? He grinned. Then this little video goes to the cops. I swallowed hard. I had come here thinking I had the upper hand. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. Mike may have been a scammer, but he wasn't stupid. He had planned for this. And for the first time that night, I realized I might be in serious trouble. Mike sat across from me, grinning like he had already won. He thought he had me trapped. The fake video on his phone, clearly edited to make it look like I was withdrawing money from a bank I'd never even stepped foot in, was his insurance policy. His way of making sure I didn't take him down. But what Mike didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that I wasn't just one step ahead of him. I was 5. I exhaled slowly, acting like I was shaken. Let him think he had the upper hand. All right, Mike, I said. I see what you're doing. He leaned forward, still smirking. Then you know how this is going to go. Delete the files, walk away, and we both forget tonight ever happened. I nodded. Sure, but I have one question. His smirk faltered. What? I pulled out another piece of paper from my jacket and slid it across the table. Mike frowned and picked it up. As his eyes scanned the words, his expression changed. His grin vanished. His hands started shaking. Because what I had just handed him was a full police report. Filed 3 days ago. A fraud complaint against him, complete with evidence. Bank records. Witness statements. Security footage, real footage, from the banks he actually scammed. You thought I came here alone, didn't you? I said, keeping my voice calm. You thought this was just between us? Mike's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I tapped my phone. You see, I have friends too. And one of them? Works in cybersecurity. That video of yours? Fake. And guess what? It's not hard to prove. You send that to the cops? You'll only be digging your own grave. Mike's face was pale now. His breathing was uneven. I wasn't done. Oh, and one more thing. I smiled. The cops? They already have copies of everything. I gave them all the evidence 3 days ago. If you don't believe me, check your phone. Mike hesitated, then grabbed his phone. He unlocked it and saw exactly what I wanted him to see. A new email. From his own bank. His accounts? Frozen. I saw panic flash in his eyes. That's right, I said. You're not just broke, Mike. You're being investigated for fraud. And not just by me. His head snapped up. What do you mean? I said, your old business partners. The ones you scammed before? I tracked some of them down. They were very interested in what I found. Mike's breathing was ragged now. I leaned in. You didn't just try to steal from me, Mike. You made a career out of screwing people over. And now? Now it's all coming back to you. His face twisted in pure desperation. Wait, he said, his voice shaking. We can work something out. I laughed. Work something out? Like how you tried to trap me here and force me to sign away my savings. His hands balled into fists. He was out of options, and he knew it. Then, a knock at the door. Mike flinched. I checked my watch. Right on time. The knock came again. Then, a voice. Police. Open up. Mike shot up from his chair, his eyes wide in pure fear. I stood up, grabbed my papers, and walked to the door. Before I opened it, I turned back to look at him one last time. Game over, Mike. Then, I opened the door. 2 officers stepped inside. Mike, last name, one of them said. Mike didn't move. He was frozen. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of financial misconduct. They stepped forward and grabbed him. He fought. Screaming, begging, trying to say it was all a misunderstanding. But they weren't listening. As they dragged him out, his eyes met mine. Pure hatred. Pure panic. I just smiled. And just like that, Mike was gone. Mike was hit with multiple fraud charges. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Turns out, he had scammed more people than even I had realized, and once the investigation started, more victims came forward. Laura, my sister, was devastated. At first, she didn't believe it. But when she saw the truth, she filed for divorce immediately. I made sure she got a good lawyer. She was left with debt, but at least she wasn't legally tied to his crimes. As for me, I walked away with every cent of my savings. And the satisfaction of knowing that Mike, the man who thought he was untouchable, would be spending the next several years behind bars. Revenge? Yeah, it was sweet.